Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. I won this game a couple minutes ago. You see, it's inaccurate overall. It's inaccurate mostly by the way of really complicated position. It was mostly open board with a lot of different factors and tactics hanging out in the open. So uh, I'm glad to have won, and let's see how that happened. I played d4. After d5, c4, we have the queen's gambit. One way to decline is knight to f6, knight c3. On white's third move in the queen's gambit, declined, he most often develops a knight, either to f3 or c3. Then this funky move, weird, huh? Uh, yeah, bishop e6, and that was almost it. That was about as much as I needed. Uh, Horribly positioned in front of its own e pawn, and closed the position with pawn to c5, and then after my opponent played knight to c6, I played knight to f3. My opponent signals a fianchetto with pawn to g6, not a bad move, and white gets his dark squared bishop out and into the game in a very active square at f4, with really awesome possibilities on the h2 b8 diagonal. And he's also still mobile along the c1 h6 diagonal. Knight b5, aiming at the weakly defended square at b7. And I think black plays the strongest move here, or a strong move, good move, kingside castles. And even so, white continues forward with, he can no longer fork the king and rook, obviously, but with knight takes c7, white gathers a pawn, and with the fork of rook and bishop, white's going to gather the bishop on e6, captures towards e6, makes these two pawns doubled on the e file, and we'll see how inconvenient that ends up being for black later on. So the rook moves to escape attack, and white eyes and plays the great move knight takes e6. After pawn takes e6, queen to b3 was the blunder of the game. Where are we with that? Let's take a look on the analysis mode. Queen to b3 asks for knight e4. And perhaps queen takes b7, and if rook b8, then the knight's gone. It's just the rook, actually. So knight to e4. Why is white afraid of the move knight to e4? Afraid of it to the tune of 4 pawns worth of material here on the evaluation bar. Knight e4, castles queenside would not be the move, but Torch 4 is recommending the castle queenside on move 11. And then that, okay. So there is, sorry here, folks. The idea of knight to e4 is it's just a really awesome post. Also unveils a discovered attack against the bishop at f4. And perhaps white must meet too many demands all at once. Bishop g3 looks like it's holding, but I can't promise you that. I'm not so certain about that. Rook takes f4. Here it's still I'm still critical of kingside castles. Let's see if we can get this figured out in practice. Let's say, for instance, bishop g3. It says it's a mistake. And then there's... Alright, yeah, so here's the deal. The queen check at a5 is very strong, especially with good blocks by my queen being not the thing because of the knight covering the c3 square. Other blocks like knight to d2 lose at least the knight, and I'm seeing here now it's checkmate. Queen takes d2, checkmate. So this all goes back to why the move queen to b3, a seemingly strong move, ends up in disaster after knight to e4. We're not grabbing the pawn on b7 to get checkmated after queen takes. We're not grabbing the pawn on b7 to get checkmated after queen to a5 check. Suppose the bishop could come back. It's reasonably complicated. I'll look at it later. I'm sure the machine has it right. So queen to b3 was the blunder of the game. Now, like I said, this game was not all that accurate, so we're looking at a lot of lousy moves through here. And I'll try to, once that sort of peters out, then looks like here on move 14, bishop takes c4, brings some sanity to the board. To recapture the material, white can make progress by capturing on c4, threatening this pawn on e6 that I told you was horribly placed. And there's nothing happening on the B and C files as far as white is concerned. We're going to keep the pawn chain strong all the way from the king side across the center to the queen side. B takes c5. Queen takes e6 check, also gathers a knight. So the move king to h8 is a mistake beyond. Hardly, yeah, not hardly. Look, the two moves are almost exactly the same in evaluation. So this notation of this move being a mistake is just, it's incorrect. And queen takes e4. After c takes b4, we're going to force the exchange of material along the a1 h8 diagonal. Rook moves to f7. We'll continue to pursue the most aggressive route as white's king is quite safe, even while in the middle here. And knight to g5 gets at the rook at f7. There's too many tactics for black to answer all of them. We pick up the bishop. In order to retain that material, he loses a queen to a knight via this fork. And so it's over. I played queen e5 in attempts to play the most forcing line that shows a win. My opponent showed class by the block at f6, and then the game's going to be over soon because black has lost his queen. Kingside castles protects f2 adequately, and white can do just about anything and succeed here. Not just about anything, but white has won this game. So as a fun game, let's see if when we finish the game with practice, perhaps let's just see what happens. So, as you know, sometimes in the endgame, trades are more important than pawns. Not always, but often. So instead of capturing with the pawn on a4 with the move queen takes a4, we're going to force a trade of rooks. And even as now they're doubled, they look fierce, but it's still a trade of rooks. So here we see the computer at once, king g7. Human moves here would be like rook f8 or rook to f5. I'm not sure how to explain why one is human and the other is less so. We'll go with the computer has played with what the computer has played, and that's king to g7, even though that makes the win almost trivial. Trade rooks and the a pawn is gone, going all the way down to Promotion Town. He'll put on a crown and then turn back around. We wait for a minute because of a check, and then it's these two queens that I suspect have checkmated black on the back rank. They're getting horny now and moving for a spank. Alright, so a little bit outside the beaten path there. Alright. Because he's king, but not in my dream. I believe in holy matrimony, monogamy, no tricks up my sleeve. Alright, so overall a fun game, kind of a wild game through that. I think sometimes it's called fruit punch, and there's a lot of errors in a short span like that. But wild game, a fun game, and even a bit of cabaret. Rap, freestyle rap. Okay, thank you all for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.